Hi.
Hello all. This is the subhead in Ray Franz's chapter in Search of Christian Freedom, the chapter called The Faithful and Discreet Slave. The head is Generations of a Slave Class Conveying Ever Increasing Light? Something that seriously compounds the problem for the Watchtower organization in its claims, as Ron Fry recognized, is the constant application of Proverbs 4:18. But the path of the righteous ones is like the bright light that is getting lighter and lighter until the day is firmly established. As if this verse referred to some kind of continuously progressive advancement in doctrinal knowledge and scriptural understanding.
In reality, the organization presents two contradictory positions. On the one hand, it says that the light consistently gets brighter and brighter. And on the other hand, it says that apostasy produced such great and continuing darkness for long centuries that Russell and the Watchtower Society had to revive the great truths taught by Jesus and the apostles. It never attempts to resolve this obvious contradiction, but continues to talk about the bright light that keeps getting lighter and lighter. As just one example, we find this statement in the July 15, 1960 Watchtower, page 435. Quote, "Down through the years, the slave-like congregation has been feeding its true members faithfully and discreetly. From Pentecost, AD 333, up to this very present hour, this has been lovingly and carefully performed. Yes, and these domestics have been fed on progressive spiritual food that keeps them abreast of the bright light that is getting lighter and lighter until the day is firmly established." Proverbs 4:18. All this has proved to be food at the proper time, as stated by Jesus. End of quote.
On this, Ron Fry comments, quote, "According to this last quotation, the slave has not only always been nourished by wholesome spiritual food, but it has been nourished by progressive spiritual food, not regressing, not remaining static, but always moving forward spiritually with the increasing light of truth." This then is the carefully laid premise regarding the Watchtower Society's teaching of the faithful and discreet slave illustration of Matthew 24. It came into existence on Pentecost Day of 33 AD and was to have a continuous, uninterrupted history down through the centuries, up to and including the end of the world. All the while, it would be progressively feeding its members on spiritual food, becoming increasingly enlightened as time went on. The question to be answered then is, how does the history of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society dovetail or square with this premise? If we enforce the consequences of the Society's interpretation of Matthew 24, 45 to 47, what do we find? If their history does not square with their own premise, then the premise is demonstrably false.
So now back to Ray. If the claimed application were valid, it would mean that each succeeding century would have seen a growth in understanding, in clarity of doctrinal teaching, with each succeeding generation of the faithful and discreet slave class passing on such increased illumination to the next generation. By the time the Waldenses and the Lollards in the 13th and the 14th centuries, there should have been a tremendous growth in understanding. And by the 1870s, when Charles Taze Russell came on the scene, the light already being enjoyed by the slave class should logically have proceeded to a point of shining with dazzling brilliance.
Recall the claim made by governing body member Carl Klein, as later expressed in the Watchtower, February 15, 1981, quote, "No question about it, we all need help to understand the Bible, and we cannot find the scriptural guidance we need outside the faithful and discreet slave organization." End of quote. Well, if that statement generally expresses an unchanging principle as to God's way of directing his servants, then it was valid and true in Russell's time. Russell then should certainly have gone to the faithful and discreet slave class of his day and received the brilliant light then shining, according to the doctrine of the light growing brighter and brighter. The Watchtower Society's publications say he did no such thing. He did just the opposite, and inexplicably was apparently uniquely exempt from needing to adhere to such principle, he alone being able to study the Bible independently of any faithful and discreet slave organization and still understand it.
Obviously, there was no already existing 18th centuries old faithful and discreet slave class, which Russell and his associates felt that they could go to and fellowship with and receive the great accumulation of spiritual light that the passage of the centuries should have brought. Their need for independent study is stressed in Watchtower publications. This would make it appear that, after 18 centuries of Jesus fulfilling his promise to be with his followers and to guide, support, and bless them, true Christianity on earth had been reduced to just this handful of Americans meeting together in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. To take the organization's teaching for what it says, this is the extreme to which we would have to go. Yeah, it does seem a little unbelievable.
So the organization, in many witnesses' minds, I'd have to say, maybe the majority, is continuous from not just from the first century to today, but back in time, apparently all the way to Cain and Abel, to hear the Society's publications. But Ray is having trouble, as Ron Fry is, in putting together these 2 points of view. How do you have continuous growth of light in truth, but also apostasy from the 2nd century at least onwards till Charles Russell's day, and also the FDS being continuous during the 2,000 years?
Where there's a whole period of time where Christendom seems to be in darkness completely, and the need for Russell to come up. Well, why would he need to come up if there was already an existing faithful and discreet slave, or an organization?
This despite the fact that Christ said he would be with his believing church always, even unto the end of the days, or the conclusion of the system of things. And then there's the problem, of course, of, does the Bible itself predict an apostasy? They to their credit, I guess you might want to interpret it, they have now gone back to Russell's position that no, the faithful and discreet slave is only now. It's only the last generation, the last 4 generations.
Yeah, but then that leads you to the question of what was God doing?
What was God doing?
All those centuries. Yeah. And what kind of a God is he if he would leave people in darkness for centuries? Yeah.
Is the kingdom of Christ then set up in the days of Christ, as he says it was? The kingdom of God is among you, or is it that the kingdom of Satan and his cohorts has actually dominated the course of the world and even the church for 2,000 years?
Yeah.
So in the next segment, you've got 2 short subheads: faithfully providing food at the right time, and also exemplary discretion or lamentable indiscretion.